And just like that, another week has passed in the Ontario Hockey League, which means we are 1 week closer to the playoffs, and we continue counting that down here on the OHL podcast. My name is Mike Farwell. My partner in this podcast is Dan Mahar. You'll find him on X at his name, Dan Mahar. You'll find me on X at Farwell_OHL. And as I get this started this week, I just saw him because I am in Peterborough as we record this week's episode of the OHL podcast. And about 24 hours ago, I saw my buddy Kenny Walls in Ottawa. He's been calling games for the 67s on radio for as long as I can remember. And Dan, we were talking last week about suspensions and whether or not, because we'd had a good number, 4 in a week. It felt like, are there more suspensions this year? Like, what's going on? Kenny, being Kenny, keeps stats. He's got spreadsheets. Anybody with spreadsheets, I think, should seek some sort of assistance in their life because one can only have so many spreadsheets. But anyway, Kenny keeps track. He's got his own database from trades and his own database from suspensions. And based on Kenny's numbers, and I just did a quick look because spreadsheets and I don't always get along, and I was doing this from my phone. But it looks like, according to Kenny's numbers in Ottawa, way more suspensions last year compared to this year, at least so far. But we still have time. So maybe it's just a gut feeling thing or a hunch when you see those suspensions coming down, Dan.
Did you hear that, Matthew Hilachar? You still got time. Come on, I had to. When you asked that question about how many there had been, I'm thinking it feels like there's been a lot of kind of more minor ones. But now that Kenny mentions it, last year was pretty heavy too, and there was quite a few, especially early in that one. It seemed like every other day there was a suspension. So yeah, in my head I wasn't adding up the tallies, but good to know he did. So that's interesting.
Yeah, and every time we need stats like that, we'll just go, hey Kenny, what's the stat on this? And he'll look at one of his spreadsheets because Kenny, there's no help. There's not enough help in the world for that guy. Okay, and since you mentioned him, I don't think I'm telling tales out of school about Matthew Hilachar because obviously I am the broadcaster for the Kitchener Rangers. They do not employ me, but it is my job to broadcast their games. The radio station employs me, but I go on the road with the team, which is where I am right now as we record this week's episode. So I'm around the players a little bit, maybe a little bit more than your average bear when you're traveling with the team and you're around the team for all 68 games. And I will let you know this much. Matthew Hilachar is getting a good deal of ribbing from his teammates for playing so few games and then getting back into the trouble with the law. And listen, this kid, he's got a great personality and a great sense of humor. And even I was teasing him a little bit. I'm like, hey, Latch, like, when are we going to stop with the suspensions and start with the playing? Like, you got some pretty good hands when you want to use them. And he just chuckles about it and he promises to be better. And I guess we'll see. But here's another thing, Dan. Let's just take this half a step further. How would you feel like if you are a coaching staff, if you are a team, maybe you want somebody, and I'm looking at you, Sawyer Bolton, with affection, and maybe Ryder Bolton with some degree of affection. Maybe you want that guy on your team that's just a little bit unpredictable. Yes, Matthew Hilachar seems to continually cross that line because 4 suspensions this season. But maybe, just maybe, you want that sort of unpredictability on your team to keep the other team on an edge of some sort. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there for conversation.
It's interesting because over the years of playing hockey, I can think of a few coaches they had that had theories about intimidation and some of these things over the years. And I won't name names, but let's just say I had the opportunity to play with a guy who was a little unhinged, took a lot of suspensions, and I feel strongly that our team put up with a lot less with him on the team. They knew he was lurking. They knew he was in the stands even when he wasn't playing. This guy bought us some respect, bought us some room out there. And I think that screw loose factor definitely came into it. He wasn't always in the lineup, wasn't great. People would complain, he's always taking penalties, he's always suspended. But other teams gave us some room, let me tell you.
Will you forgive me for dropping a name if I drop a name right now because it just popped into my head?
Absolutely.
Okay. So earlier today, before I traveled to Peterborough, I was still in our nation's capital of Ottawa. Great city, love it to death. I was enjoying a beverage, and into the same establishment came none other than Matthew Barnaby. former assistant coach here in Kitchener. So I went up and we had a little chat, and he was great. And that kind of player comes to mind when we're talking about this very thing. And I think Matthew Barnaby had a very fine National Hockey League career. Thank you very much.
He is one of the more interesting players I think ever to play because, with all due respect, Matthew, definitely, I think he'd be the first to tell you, definitely a screw loose. I heard him say he, more than anyone probably ever to play the game, enjoyed getting punched in the face. So, I mean, that alone tells you all you need to know about that guy. But the funny thing is, he talked about Matthew Hilachar taking some ribbing from the teammates. Matthew Barnaby talked about the ribbing he took from teammates for the fact that if you stay on the ice, you're scoring almost every shift. What are you doing? Like, you have skill, you have ability, and he just couldn't help himself. So, guy gets 30 goals one year, 40 some another year in the Quebec League, and 400 penalty minutes in both years. So you do the math if he actually stayed on the ice. But yeah, those guys give you a different dynamic to your lineup for sure.
All right, this little tangent on the OHL podcast, there's always one, brought to you by the OHL podcast, and our good partners at DraftKings. Will tell you more about them in just a moment, but I'm far too long into this episode to remind you to please subscribe, okay? If you're here, just hit that subscribe button, give us a like, leave a comment and a review, tell a friend about us, because we are always looking to grow this OHL podcast community. You'll find us virtually everywhere, Facebook and Instagram, the OHL podcast, on YouTube, of course, the OHL podcast as well. And our email address is so easy, ohlpodcast@rogers.com. We're going to go into the email box and get another great goalie story from one of our podcast community members. So I can't wait to share that with you as well. And maybe, just maybe, Dan, all of this tangential conversation to start this week's OHL podcast is to avoid the story that we have to start with. Could that possibly be the case?
Possible.
Let's get into that story because something smells in the city of Oshawa. Now, Dan, I don't know about the circle that you hang out with, but in my world, oftentimes I hear it referred to as the dirty schwa. I don't know why, but it's always been in the vocabulary around the people I hang out with. Maybe I need to hang out with new people, but oh my gosh, the dirty schwa took on a whole new meaning this past week. And I don't know what it takes to clean the stink, pun intended, off the organization and the city after what happened this week.
I think when I first showed you that story, my reaction was, could this possibly be real? Because I'd seen it from so many vetted sources. I'm like, I think this is real, but this looks like a joke. And, I to your comment about the dirty schwa, we love you, Oshawa. I got nothing but love for you. But I have cousins, as you know, in Eastern Ontario. When I mentioned this story to one of them, his reaction was, well, I would have guessed they were top three for sure. So I'm going to challenge you, Farwell. This is like for our listeners of our podcast. I think they need to hear your definitive rankings of fan base hygiene.
Well, you see, this is the thing. Maybe this is why in Oshawa, and can I just add to what Dan said? I love you, Oshawa. I love you, GM workers. Like, I'm right there with you all the time, okay? If I had one complaint about Tribute Community Center, it's the walk to the press box. Now, Dan, maybe that is intentional because I am so far removed from the uncleansed masses down below that how would I possibly know, Dan? But when Dan sent me this story, and I didn't know you had seen it on so many vetted sources prior to sending me the link you sent me, but my response, you'll remember, is not in a million years do I think this is true. But it's true. And it's spectacular as a story because the Oshawa General sent an email to their season ticket holders base saying, hey, would you mind following some personal hygiene tips before you come and enjoy a game at the Tribute Community Center? And among those tips was, hey, if you go to the gym before you come to the game, grab a shower. Because, you don't want those odors for your neighbor next to you sitting in a seat. And I didn't believe it was real, but it was absolutely real. In a nutshell, fans were asked to shower before games, and make sure their body odor is not offensive when they come to the rink. It's incredible that the team sent out this email, but they did.
They did, and a few days later, follow up from the team, right, saying
Oh, I think
we
it was
apologize.
less than a few days. It was a few hours. It was later that same day, Dan. The Gens walked it back, said they're going to take the 2 minutes on this one and apologize. I don't know. And then when they won the game that night against Peterborough, they said they showered the Petes with goals. I thought, oh boy, like doubling, tripling, quadrupling down. I have no idea, but eesh from where I'm sitting.
Yeah, and I never thought in a million years you'd see a communication like that from the team. And I guess from their side, you try to think of it. Well, maybe if they've had a number of complaints and they're worried about, is it bad enough they're worried about losing ticket holders based on the quality of the experience? Is this really something that's that bad? And then, but I think overreach was the word that they used in their follow-up apology. So clearly, some of the fans were a little stinky about that message. So it's just a surreal story, is it not?
If you think I'm letting these puns go in the wraparound this week, by the way, because I'm on Eastern Conference duty, you don't know me at all. So brace yourself. But I agree with you, Dan, that the volume of complaints must have been such that the team felt they had no choice but to address it in this way. Obviously, it's the wrong way. And hey, Gens, if you want a little bit of upfront advice, some sober second thought, come to the OHL podcast. Farwell and Mahar will have plenty of suggestions for you, because the problem with, again, the number of complaints must have been such that the team felt they had to address it in this manner. But you have taken your entire season's ticket base now, which is thousands of people, and painted them with the same brush. And I would guess that if you're in the dozens of complaints, that would be a lot. I think that would be an exaggeration. I don't know how many, but if it's even dozens, I think that would be a lot. But just imagine dozens versus the thousands of season ticket holders. What I would have done in this case is send a message to my ushers and let fans know, if you've got an issue, talk to the nearest usher. That usher can, and I know it wouldn't be comfortable for the usher in that section, but listen, could you come with me? Because this is not working here. I don't know. You have to do it in a more individualized basis, I do believe, instead of this mass email that paints everybody with the same brush. And we've all seen what has happened since. It is a social media and hockey media, traditionally, nightmare for the Oshawa Generals.
Is it ever? And and it's tough for the team to be the arbiter of this, but I mean, just in general, right? When you're going out to a public event, a concert, a sporting event, whatnot, you're kind of rolling the dice in terms of who's going to be around you and what the experience is going to be like. And there's I've heard people complaining about perfumes and things like that for years. So I mean, it's just in general, you got to think, if you're going into a tightly packed crowd of strangers, you never know what you're going to get. But to actually see the team have to issue this statement makes you, like you said, two big problems with that. I wondered, how bad was the issue that they felt they actually had to communicate this? And secondly, like you just said, now anyone, poor Oshawa General season ticket holder walking around town, has to be a little bit leery to admit they're an Oshawa General season ticket holder, no?
They should have T-shirts that say, "I'm not an Oshawa General season ticket holder. I don't smell." Oh my goodness, a bad move, and they've walked it back. But I don't think the odor from this story will dissipate anytime soon, Dan.
No, but I don't know if you did see, like you'd expect, some people are having fun with it, and I forget where I saw it. I apologize to whoever put this on social media, but there were some folks in the stands at their next game with signs saying, I saw one said, "I'm with Smelly," with the arrow pointing beside him, and there was one saying, there was a few like that, and one said, I think, "You telling me the fans stink? What about the refs?" So they're having fun with it, right? So that's the only thing you can do with this.
You telling me the fans stink? What about the team? Last in the Canadian Hockey League this year. I mean, it's not going well for Oshawa, which doesn't help matters in the least. But I'm glad some people are at least taking it with a grain of salt and looking for the humor in this.
I think it's all you can do.
Let's get into the email box here, because we got a great one from Jason, which will tie into a conversation that Dan and I were planning to have this week. Anyway, we'll start with the story. And I'm sure, Dan, you'll remember, and I hope our listeners remember the Joey Costanzo story that was shared with us a year ago when he was in Brantford. Even though the Spitfires were losing that game, the way he interacted with a young fan down around the glass. And, this is the losing goaltender in a tough game. And he took the time to have a human moment with a fan. Similar here, the story that Jason shares when he sends us the email to ohlpodcast@rogers.com. Some buddies and I have been going around doing every OHL arena to get a fan experience league-wide. No specific matchups in particular. We're Rangers fans, but any game is great hockey. I love that philosophy. It really is a great league, and I'm glad you're checking it out, Jason and friends. Recently, we attended the Peterborough Petes game against the Ottawa 67s. During the pregame ceremony, there was a tribute to their former coach, Vince Millette, who had passed. By the way, let's just acknowledge that quickly, too. At 64, far too young, and the OHL community mourns along with the Millette family. So our condolences as well. A sponsor tribute also contributed to this pregame ceremony with the ceremonial puck drop and the Canadian national anthem. While all of this was going on, Jason writes, there were kids on either side of the ice holding a large Canada flag and a large Pete's flag. The kids looked around 5 years old, and as you can imagine, staying still and focused for such a long period of time was challenging. The kids near the 67's goal got a bit bored by the long wait, and a few decided they were quite close to Ryder Federolf, who, why not go see how Ryder was doing? Ryder was exceptional with the kids. He gave fist bumps and was visibly laughing with the kids and engaging with them during the ceremonial puck drop. It wasn't a massive gesture, but most definitely made those kids' night. Thought he deserved a shout out for being such a pro about the surprise visitors in his crease. Dan Mahar, thoughts?
Well, yeah, first of all, thanks for the email, Jason. Great email. And I couldn't agree with you more. Like, he talks about him and his buddies traveling around this league, and it doesn't really matter who they see, right? Which speaks about, I think you and I would both agree, Mike. It's almost every game you see in this is high quality hockey. And the game Jason just referenced with this, a lot of goals there, and that didn't go Ottawa's way in that one. But for the fact that it didn't, and Ryder Federolf still found the time to have that interaction, I think that's just a great little tidbit, because I'm going to botch the saying, but what is it? Like, character is not revealed in triumph, character is revealed in the tough times. And to be able to still reveal your true character regardless of how things are going for you personally on that day, that speaks a lot about these kids. And you just love to see it, because those kids he was interacting with, we might see one or two of them playing in this league in a few years, and that's what it's all about.
Maybe Fedorov won't do that again, because he got torched for 5 and got pulled in that game. And by the way, that'll come up in the wraparound as well. But while we're on the subject, having been on the road this past week, and this is some of the stuff that I try my best when I have time to share with you on our Instagram page. So again, shameless plug, check out the Instagram page, the OHL podcast. And of course, one of the stops in Ottawa, I did have some time to get out, see the city a little bit. I always try to check out Parliament while I'm here, the National War Memorial. I share these photos. And I noticed when I was just looking at how the content landed with our followers, I noticed that Ryder Federolf had also seen the photos. And I was tempted. I went over to his page and I was tempted, Dan, but I felt like I might be a little bit of a creep if I did it, but I was going to send him a message and just say, hey, because I had just seen him play, because I was going through these analytics later in the day. And as you know, Dan, the game that he played against the Kitchener Rangers, he was absolutely exceptional. And I was watching this kid a couple of times. I looked over at my buddy Kenny. I mentioned him earlier, calling the games for radio for the 67s. We're right next to each other in broadcast booths, and there's just a little partition separating us. And I'd look over at Kenny and throw my arms out to my side like, are you kidding me? Or I'd mouth the word wow, and unbelievable. So I was going to send Ryder Federolf a message over Instagram, and then thought, Farwell, that's creepy. Don't do that to the young man. Let him just go be the great goalie that he is and interact with the kids, and that'll be the end of that. But I don't know if I missed an opportunity there, but I was tempted.
Well, and yeah, it's great to see, because that, like you said, that kid hasn't just been brilliant in that game on the week. He's been brilliant all year, and what a coup for Ottawa to have him in the crease this year. But like we talked about many times, they can come out of nowhere and sometimes develop a little late. But there's a kid who's, I think, just from just outside of Pittsburgh, suburb of Pittsburgh, and here he is in the nation's capital, enjoying every minute of it and bringing this that brand of high caliber goaltending, which we've talked about a few times on the podcast how good it is in the league this year, and none better than him.
Ryder Federolf, stopping pucks, making kids' nights, and following stories on the OHL podcast Instagram page. What a guy. He's got it all, that Ryder Federolf does. So Jason's email goes on to a topic that Dan and I had actually intended to discuss this week. And Jason writes to ohlpodcast@rogers.com. For a while, there had been talk about expansion into the U.S. As you've indicated on the pod, that's been paused because the NHL doesn't love the idea of the OHL setting up shop in certain U.S. markets, at least not right now. Do you think the OHL would consider expanding in Ontario? How many clubs do you believe they could feasibly have in the OHL without watering down the product? Dansky, what say you on this idea from Jason?
Well, there's a lot in there. So to start with the idea of expanding in Ontario, yeah, I think the league has. I mean, I think Commissioner Brian Crawford's been very open about interest in expanding within Ontario, particularly in the GTA. In terms of the watered down, that's a a loaded question these days, right? Because you hear a lot of people talking about, well, is this becoming a younger league now with all the exits to the NCAA and all the options available, and is it going to become a glorified 16 to 18-year-old league with a handful of older kids? And we don't know. All I can say is that there's an awful lot of talent in the hockey pool in Ontario still. We see it every year when the draft comes up too. So I'm not as worried about the watering down as long as they keep it within reason, right? So, if you're talking expanding by 2 to 4 teams, I'm not worried about the watering down piece. I am worried about the viability of the GTA markets because we've struggled with this forever. I feel like it's only a matter of time till a market gets established there and really takes off and does well, especially with the population base in north of the GTA right now. But I mean, time will tell. We'll see it because it's a lot more expensive, a lot more investment now to build these arenas that are OHL caliber without knowing if you're even getting a team when you have to start approve the arena and then to fill it enough to keep that arena viable for years on end. So I think there's still a lot of question marks, but to answer your questions, yes, I think there's very much interest in expanding within Ontario, and I think the talent pace can support it.
Here's what we know. And to your point, Dan, about the expense of building these arenas today and then maintaining them in perpetuity is a great point. There's always been talk about Chatham. And we know that they have decided, at least for now, that they don't have the financial wherewithal to pull this off. So as much as it's always been talked about, I don't think there's anything immediate that will happen in that part of southwestern Ontario. But just this week, the city of Vaughan has made it clear that it would like to get into the OHL game or at least build an arena that could one day host an OHL team. I don't know if that would satisfy the GTA kind of market that you alluded to, Dan, that Commissioner Crawford would like to be involved in. Vaughan always described itself, I remember the advertisements, as the city above Toronto, the city of Vaughan. But either way, it's in the news just this past week that Vaughan is interested in building an OHL-sized, OHL-ready arena. When we were talking about expansion last season on this podcast, we know that there's a conversation in Burlington, and that's actually probably 2 steps further down the road than the Vaughan conversation right now for an OHL-ready arena in Burlington. So there are 2 markets, and again, you might not be in the GTA, but you're swimming in GTA waters. The mayor of Cornwall, and I know I'm getting into one of my favorite conversations here about bringing back the Cornwall Royals. There's a lot of work to do for the arena in Cornwall, but the mayor has been very vocal about, yes, we want the OHL back. And shout out to my buddy Colin in Ottawa, who brought me a Cornwall Royals jacket to put on, like a vintage 1980s, maybe late 70s Cornwall Royals leather jacket. That also got posted on the OHL podcast Instagram page over the weekend while I've been up here in Eastern Ontario. But Cornwall has made it clear they would be very interested. So there's 3 markets right now: Vaughan, Burlington, who are pledging that they're going to build arenas that would be OHL ready. Cornwall wants a franchise back. All of this, though, I think, Dan, and when we talked about expansion most recently on this podcast, to Jason's point about watered down, I think there is an interest in ensuring that these 20 teams right now are on as solid a foundation as possible, because there's just too much uncertainty in this new landscape with the NCAA opportunities. So you want to make sure that your OHL clubs are just kind of locked right into offering the best player experience. And I think they're doing a great job in that, but that might be part of the reason that we're hesitating just a little bit. But I also heard a rumor, and it's just a rumor, just this weekend though. I wouldn't share it with you if it didn't come from interesting enough sources to share it. But you and I, Dan, were talking just the other week about a rebalancing of the schedule and maybe just going with 2 conferences instead of the divisions the way we've got them right now. And it was suggested to me that the league might not want to do that right now because they are still ready to get US-based teams, Muskegon and Youngstown, into this league sooner rather than later. So why mess with the conferences right now when you're just going to be adding new teams in the very near future? That just came to me from pretty credible places this weekend.
Well, I mean, there's a lot to digest in what you just said, but when you look at the U.S. markets too, we talked about it recently when I was going through my unsung heroes list and how many of those kids were American. So you tap into a whole new talent base when you have those franchises there as well. And I think when we evaluate the viability of new franchises in Ontario, I think there's different problems facing the ones you referenced, Mike. So when you talk about Vaughan, that northern GTA market, tons of population base there, a lot of wealth and money that might facilitate an arena better than some of the other smaller communities. I've always felt one of the big challenges with the GTA, the periphery of the GTA there, is the maybe a little bit of a lack of community identity. Like you get north of Toronto, and I'm not sure anyone knows where Brampton ends, and Vaughan and King City and Markham start, and Stouffville, and you name it. There's kind of a blending of a suburb of Toronto, right? So that community identity and spirit that helps foster support behind a hockey team is a struggle to get there. But if you look where Vaughan's placed, I mean, strategically right between Brampton and Oshawa and Barrie, like right in the middle of that triangle, it makes for some natural rivalries and short travel. Then you go to Cornwall, and I think a different problem's facing them, right? I always think there's a more viable case to be made for these markets like Cornwall and Owen Sound, where there's that really strong community identity, right? And everyone would rally behind the team. And if you look at Owen Sound, not a big population base, not as nearly as much money as in the North GTA, but they rally around that kind of regional idea, right? Where you can draw from a farther field to get fans, and same with Cornwall. But I think the issue there is always going to be the arena, right? Because you talk about the financing, and the longer you wait, and I'm sure anyone under the age of about 35 right now trying to buy a home can relate to this, where the longer you wait, the further out of reach it seems to get, because you cannot save at the amount that construction costs and building costs go up. So, you see these arenas quoted right now, the Vaughan one around $400 million for a 10,000 seater, or $260 million for a 5,000 seater. Well, if you wait 5-10 years, is that $700 million? You start to get to numbers that are not going to ever be realistic for the tax base that we're talking about. So it's a challenge that Brian Crawford and the league are going to have to address. But they're both viable and not viable for different reasons, I think, depending which market you're looking at.
I think it would be safe to say, in summary to Jason's inquiry, whether it's expansion in Ontario, Dan, or the merging of some teams from the U.S., I'd say stay tuned, because I'm getting the sense again that this is imminent. I don't think it's going to be long, like maybe 2 years at the most, before we see new teams in the OHL. That's my gut feeling right now. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like the whispers have gotten stronger, right, for a long time, and it feels like it's just a matter of time. So my question would just be, we've seen how Brian Crawford has messaged these teams that we want to raise the standard, right? Raise the standard of what your rink looks like, what your facilities look like, what the player experience looks like, which means money, right? Teams need more money. So to admit some of these other smaller towns or smaller franchises, or ones that have been operating on USHL standards, do you have to relent a little on your standards you're seeking to admit them? But I'm sure these conversations are all happening, and we'll see. But I'm with you. I feel like it's just a matter of time, and it's not going to be that much time.
This is a hockey podcast, of course, the OHL podcast, but are we seeing a little baseball coming into our game here in the Ontario Hockey League? We'll check into that. Plus, your weekly prospect of the week, the NHL draft eligible player that's catching the attention of me and Dan. And of course, your weekly wraparound, where we take a look at every single market in this league. Yes, including the one that you cheer for, and then you can get some insight into the other 19 as well. Our wraparound is coming up on this week's episode of the OHL podcast. DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, is built for the fastest game on ice. With player props and live betting, every shift, every shot, every save gives you options to get in on the game with DraftKings Sportsbook. New customers bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN to turn $5 into $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. Every week on this podcast, we make it our mission to share with you information from every single market so the team that you cheer for gets a little bit of love. And if the team you cheer for starts with a letter that is later in the alphabet, we're not trying to shortchange them. We just tend to go alphabetically most of the time, and this is one of those most of the times. We're going to start from A and go up. Actually, in this case, if Dan's on Western Conference duty, he's going to start with E. So that's how this is going to work. But we go alphabetically. Don't worry, your team will get a mention on our weekly wraparound. Dansky, start us off in Erie, if I've got my facts straight here.
You do, and you know what, Mike? The Erie Otters have been entertaining lately. I love this phase for teams where you've sold off a little, you're going with some kids, and they're starting to step up and beat some big teams and score some goals, which I love to see for Erie. So this week, I want to point out big win over Owen Sound. Our former Kitchener Ranger Evan Hedrick potted 2 goals again in that game. But I also wanted to acknowledge the first OHL goal for Ulysses Lombardi, who came over from Flint to play for Erie. A little more opportunity. Nice to see him finally get on the board. So congratulations on a first OHL goal.
Absolutely. And Hedrick, he got his 2 against Flint, didn't he?
Yes. Sorry, I should have clarified. Lombardi's was against Owen Sound. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
And Hedrick cut his. Yeah, and a 2-goal game for this kid. I'm interested in watching because we got to know him so well in Kitchener. And we talked about when the Dylan Edwards trade happened. Are you basically trading for Evan Hedrick's future, right? You needed his potential 30-goal ability now, and that's what you got in Dylan Edwards. I'm really interested to see if Evan Hedrick gets there, but he certainly seems to be enjoying life in the place where his older brother Owen once played too.
He sure is. Win-win for both teams, I think.
Absolutely. Okay, Barrie is the first stop for me on the Eastern Conference side, and reigning OHL Player of the Week, Ben Wilmot, is loving life in Barrie. So we just talked about Hedrick in Erie. Wilmot in Barrie, of course, arrived from that trade with London. He has got 12 goals and 21 points in just 12 games as a Colt. And that has helped Barrie to the second most points since the trade deadline, behind only Kitchener. So Ben Wilmot, loving life with his new team.
And I saw someone this week point out that they are shocked that kid is not yet affiliated with an NHL team. So stay tuned. He will be.
Absolutely.
Moving to Flint. So I just wanted to use this to evaluate a couple of the big acquisitions they made at the trade deadline, and I don't think anyone can accuse Kevin He of not providing full value since coming over to the Flint Firebirds, firing at just over 1.6 points per game in his time in Flint. So great production from him. And then Jacob Battaglia came over from the Kingston Frontenacs as well, and he's firing at about half that rate. So 0.65-ish points per game. So not quite the production he saw last year with the Fronts. Maybe the adjustment period's coming along, but kind of a tale of 2 acquisitions there right now for Flint. They're still in that adjustment phase, but he is delivering.
Brampton, the next stop for me here in the East, and how about rookie Luke Johnson, who has rewritten the record books in Brampton. He turned in a 58-save performance in a 3-2 shootout loss to North Bay. Those 58 saves in a single game are a Steelheads franchise record, and for what it's worth, the second most in the OHL, the entire league this season. But good luck to the person that tries to save more than 58 in a game. Johnson's name will be in that Steelheads record book for a while.
A busy night for him.
No kidding.
A So checking in on Guelph, so same thing. They acquired Tyler Hopkins with the next year's Memorial Cup run in mind. So a bit of a slow start for him. Just 4 goals in his 18 games with Guelph and a -5. So still feeling his way out in Guelph. I'm sure they're hoping for a big leap forward next year. But also seeing a little bit of fatigue maybe from young Jovanovski in net, who has played in 40 of the 52 games. That's a heavy workload for him. So maybe starting to get some of that fatigue setting in this time of year.
Just on the Hopkins point, of course, Alex McLean, the draft eligible player that went to Kingston in that swap. And I got to see McLean up close and personal this past weekend. And I'll tell you what, he seems to be liking it just fine in the Limestone City.
Yeah, I we'll see if that ends up being a win-win as well, but I'm sure Kingston's pretty happy with what they got in that deal. Yeah.
All right, in Brantford, milestones aplenty. So stay with me as we look at this week in the Telephone City. Caleb Malhotra established a new rookie scoring record for the Bulldogs when he reached 65 points, and he's been piling on still since to that total. Gabriel Frasca, acquired in a trade with Erie, has reached 150 career points, and head coach Jay McKee won his 200th game behind the Bulldogs bench last week. So McKee now has more than 320 OHL coaching wins. If you go back to his days in Kitchener, that puts him in the top 20 all time for coaching wins in the OHL. And the only question I have for you, Dan Mahar, is will Jay McKee still be coaching in the OHL next season?
I have a feeling that'll be up to him because he will have the opportunity to not be.
Yeah, I don't think he will be. I think he's done everything he wanted to do. And I mean, we'll see how this season works out, but I'm with you. I think he's done it the right way. I'll just leave it at that. I'm not Jay McKee. You're right. It's going to be up to him. He will definitely have opportunities for sure.
He will. Yeah, and 200 wins for Jay. Congratulations. But how about 2,000 wins for those Kitchener Rangers who got their 2,000th win in franchise history this week? But one of the young pups on the Rangers, Weston Cameron, committing to UMass this week. It sounds like he'll be back in the OHL at least one more year, and then we'll see from there. But a commitment for the NCAA for him. And I just wanted to point out, too, since the trade deadline, some of the Kitchener Rangers have really taken off in the scoring department. Now, 3 of their players in the top 7 in league scoring, with Christian Humphreys, Jack Pridham, and Dylan Edwards acquired from Erie, all in the top 7 in league scoring. So that trade deadline sometimes makes your existing players a little bit better as well.
That's a really good point. And I'm going from memory here, but I'm pretty sure what Josh Brown wrote in the Waterloo Region Record about those top scoring Rangers is Kitchener, in its entire history, 2,000 wins in 63 years, has never had 3 players finish in the top 10. They've had 2 before, but never 3, if I remember correctly. So interesting to watch this down the stretch.
Yeah, and Josh brought up some really interesting names from the past in that one as well. So.
Sure did. All right, next to Kingston in the East for me, and I'm going to look at sophomore Adam Kelly, who scored his first goal of the season last weekend in a loss to the Kitchener Rangers. Kelly had scored 3 times in a shootout this season, but this was his first goal in regulation. So imagine being this guy that hasn't been able to get it done in regulation, but Troy Mann taps him on the shoulder to go out for shootouts, and he's done that 3 times. He finally got one in regulation.
Yeah, it was a nice little shot, too.
It was.
Moving to London, it's rare that you will see a London Knights team without a point-per-game player, and right now they don't have one. Their top scorer being Ryan Brown, acquired from the Sarnia Sting with 49 points in 53 games, so he might get there, a good boost for him. But when you look up and down that roster, most of their roster, a good chunk of it anyway, 12 players at even or better in the plus-minus category. So still looking like a strong team statistically, just not offensively.
Over to Niagara for me, and it will not be long before we mark an X beside the Ice Dogs' name in the standings, which means they will have clinched a playoff spot in back-to-back years. Now, Niagara missed the postseason, you'll remember, for 6 straight years before returning to the playoffs last season. And right now, they've got Ethan Zada, Hayden Reed, Ryerson Edgar, and Riley Patterson to thank for it, in my opinion. Those 4 players have combined for 51 points over the past 10 games, picking up a bit of the slack since the Ryan Robrek injury. And that's a bit of a mystery, too. He scores 2 goals in a game, then he doesn't play the next game, and it's a little bit Brady Martin-esque from where I'm sitting down. I'm not sure what's going on there, but still, the Ice Dogs are getting it done without him.
They sure are, yeah. Owen Sound. So a tip for you, Owen Sound, if you want to make the playoffs or be good, you cannot lead the league in penalty minutes and goals against, okay? So that's 2 categories you're leading the league in. You probably don't want to be. But on a positive, one thing you have always gotten right is athletic therapist Andy Brown. Nice to see him get presented his gold ring from the U18s. He's a class act.
Yeah, he really is. There are a lot of reasons that you enjoy going to Owen Sound and seeing some of the great people there. Andy Brown is absolutely among them for sure. Good nod by you, Dan. North Bay next for me, and I'm looking at defenseman Carter Kunapaski, who has his first Ontario Hockey League goal, and he scored it 2 days before his 17th birthday. So let that sink in. 16 years old still when he potted his first. The 2009-born second rounder was signed by the Battalion last June. And interestingly, 4 of Kunapaski's 5 points this season have come in the past 7 games. So maybe he's starting to find his stride and figure it out a little bit. Also, the Battalion with a statement in the battle with Niagara for 5th place in the Eastern Conference. They hammered the Ice Dogs 9-1 in North Bay. And that is a season high in goals scored for the Troops captain Ethan Procession, a season high, or a career high, 5 points in that game.
Yeah, there were some of those crooked numbers this week, Mike, and I'm just about to get to one of those when we turn to Saginaw. So I looked and saw a defenseman who won't even be NHL draft eligible for another year leave 3 stars. But before you rage, it's because Igor Barabanov had 6 points in that game, and there were 2 hat tricks from Pipoy and Zilkin. So, okay, Levi Harper, sorry. A goal and 3 assists from the D is just not good enough. You're the 4th star, all right? And that was an 11-3 win over Sarnia. What a night for Saginaw on the offensive side.
Was it ever? Okay, Oshawa, speaking of big nights offensively, the Gens are bathing in the success of their best offensive outburst of the season, scoring a season-high 8 as they showered the Petes with goals and cleaned up in an 8-4 win. Now, that did not quite erase the stench, though, of the 3-game losing streak that the Gens had leading into that win, during which they were outscored 15-6. Gens fans all now lathered up for the draft lottery. That's what's happening in Oshawa right now, is it? Okay.
Outstanding work there, Farwell.
Thank you, Dansky. Thank you. Worked hard on that. Sitting on the bus, just pounding away on stinky people puns. That's what I call them.
That was well done. Well done. Moving to Sarnia, so I'm gonna choose to forget that game against Saginaw for a second and just point out that Renfrew, Ontario goaltender Kale Ossipenko, great start, rookie of the week last week when he put up 4-3 record at that point, 277 GAA, 910 save percentage. All of this, of course, before he allowed 7 goals and 17 shots in that game against Saginaw. So we're just going to forget that. But after being called up from the CCHL, Kale Ossipenko, quite a great start. An athletic young kid. Looks like a good future for him.
I love it.
And I should mention, too, Beckham Edwards, hopefully not too seriously injured, took a knee in that game, but it's not looking great.
On the Ossipenko front, I should mention, and I'm sure this isn't telling tales out of school, but I just happened to be in Sarnia the day he was called up. He didn't start that night. No, he didn't start against Kitchener, did he? Anyway, maybe.
In Kitchener he did.
But yes. When Kitchener was in Sarnia, I think he had just been called up to back up. And anyway, he was dressed for the first time. I don't think he started that one. Shame on me for forgetting. The point in all of this is I got one of those reminders about these are just kids. I was waiting outside the Sarnia room to catch up with the coach and do a pregame interview. And I was actually chatting with GM Dylan Sika at the time. And Kale comes walking out. He didn't know where he could go to stretch. And Dylan said, just wherever you want, kid. Go ahead. Actually, I'm sure he said Kale, but you go wherever you want to go. But it just shows he's in a brand new environment, a brand new dressing room, a brand new arena. Like, where do I go to do the things I need to do? It was just such an honest question. And I loved the moment for the kid. I really did.
Yeah, went from one end of the province to the other in a heartbeat, right? And you're in the big leagues now, kid. And he's really acquitting himself well.
Yeah. He figured out where to stretch and how to stop pucks in the O. That's for sure.
He did.
Okay, to Ottawa for me, and it is all about the goaltenders, starting with Jaden Nelson, who picked up his first career shutout in a 6-0 win over Oshawa. And the next night, and we alluded to this in our story earlier, Ryder Federolf was drummed for 5 goals in a loss to Peterborough. And if I ever send Ryder Federolf a message over Instagram, I'll remind him of this. That was just the 3rd time this season that Federolf has allowed more than 3 goals in a game. Only 3 times. That 5, a 6, and a 4 has Federolf allowed more than 3 in a game. This kid is legit.
And every goalie has those games like he did in Peterborough, but the consistency on him has been off the charts.
You betcha.
So going to the Sioux, Mike. So when they acquired Carter George, it was to improve their goaltending, right? And boy, did it ever work, because since acquiring Carter George, Landon Miller has put up a .942 save percentage and a 1.33 goals against average. So I don't know if it's the friendly competition, the hey, don't forget about me factor, or when I get my opportunities, I'm going to make the most of them. Whatever the case may be, both goaltenders have been absolutely lights out since that trade for the Sioux Greyhounds.
All right, in Peterborough, where this feels like a parallel universe. I'm talking about Peterborough while in Peterborough. That's right. And the Petes this past week signed 19-year-old defenseman Holden Carter out of the BCHL's Cranbrook Bucks. Carter just goes out and picks up his first 2 OHL points in his second game in this league. And 2023 10th round pick Callum Hartnell scored his first OHL goal in Peterborough's loss to Oshawa. Hartnell's first goal came in his 33rd OHL game.
Good for him. And wrapping up in Windsor, Mike. So I think it's a weird dynamic in Windsor right now. They're still really good. They're still really at the top of the standings, but just 5-5 in the last 10. Things aren't humming along. So I kind of looked into it, what's going on, and their special teams, both PK and power play, are better than their competition, better than Kitchener, better than Flint at the top of the standings. It's their 5-on-5 play that it hasn't been as good as either of those teams. So that's where they're looking to clean it up. And Coach Greg Walters maybe instilling a little more accountability this time of the year, with both Carson Woodall and Nathan Villeneuve sitting out a period for presumably punishment for something Coach didn't like in that game against Sarnia. So starting to see a little bit of temperature turning up in Windsor.
Still looking forward to that big Windsor-Kitchener matchup in Kitchener this week. It's going to be one of the big games of the week for sure.
Oh, it will be.
All right, and for me, the wraparound ends in Sudbury. A little bit of off-ice stuff, because the Wolves made it a family affair on Family Day, bringing back legendary play-by-play man Joe Bowen to call a Wolves game with his son, David. The Bowens were in the booth together for the Wolves Ice Dogs game on Family Day afternoon. Sudbury has created a little separation with Brampton, too, for the 8th and final playoff spot in the East when you look at those standings. But in case you didn't know, Joe Bowen started his broadcasting career play-by-play in Sudbury, so it's neat to see him going back. He's got a banner hanging up in the rafters there in Sudbury. And I got to tell you, Dan, I'm not unconvinced that David will not just slide into Dad's chair, because Joe Bowen has made it clear that he is calling his last season of Toronto Maple Leafs hockey. I don't know. I don't have this on any good authority, but in me belly, this is the second time now that Dad and son have the third, because David Bowen called what do they call that in the next gen game for the Leafs? And then he called the game where his dad was recognized. Dad took the night off, Joe did, and went and spent time with family, and David went into the booth, and now Joe is coming to Sudbury to call. I don't know. I'm just saying.
Could be a Ben and Dan Schulman precedent, so it could be similar.
That's what I'm thinking. Thinking. And one more thing before we move on, I wanted to go back to, because when I mentioned Adam Kelly, his first regulation goal with the Kingston Frontenacs, you mentioned it was a nice shot. You were at the game in Kingston as well as I. And I feel a little bit like I'm going down the Brampton, Mississauga, GTA path here when I point this out. But what the hell is going on, Dan? I think I could have counted. If I spent my time, instead of calling the play-by-play, counting the fans, I could have. They announced over 3,100. That's not the number that was actually in the seats. But why? I talk to people, there are not enough parking. They don't want to come downtown from where they're living in the suburbs. I know the team isn't great this year, but that arena, Slush Puppy Place, is fantastic. And you spill out of it, and you've got more selection than you need of places to go, enjoy a post-game beverage, have a good time. I don't get it.
I don't either. And my wife was at the game with me, and she attends very few hockey games. But the first comment out of her mouth as that first period was starting was, "Where is everybody? Is this it?" And I had to kind of explain to her the background, the history. And, if she does attend a game, it's often in Kitchener, and you see the crowds there. So it was like two worlds to her, and I didn't really have a great explanation, because, like you said, great location, great city. Teams have been very strong over the years. Great. I don't get it. Come out and support that team.
Absolutely. Okay, this is a hockey podcast, but we're going to talk a little baseball in just a moment. But there's a connection. We promise. There's always a connection here on the OHL podcast. Plus, our prospects of the week still to come on the OHL podcast. Dan, you have identified a rather disturbing trend or number of baseball swing style slashes in this Ontario Hockey League, and perhaps you think it needs a little bit of addressing. We are playing the game of hockey, but those sticks are sometimes being wielded like baseball bats of late.
Yeah, it's just a weird trend, right? Like you don't usually see it. We think back to the Donald Brashear, Marty McSorley incident, and it was kind of as ugly as it gets. And then people saw earlier this year with Luke Dragosika and Brampton, a little bit of a baseball swing, connected, got a season-long suspension, pretty vicious play. Then after that, we saw Braden McCallum with his baseball swing towards John Banks. Didn't do as much damage, but again, 8-game suspension there for that. So you think, maybe the league's getting the message, but then we see Alex Kuleman in Kingston with a little bit of not nearly the same degree, but still a bit of a baseball swing to the back of Owen Protz after a hit. So that's, in a 5-game suspension there. So you're seeing some heavy suspensions handed down, all for the same action. And it's just a little puzzling to me, Mike, because we've all played the game, and I get it. Emotions are high, frustrations are high, but it was almost always taught from a very young age a no-no to take that two-hander and go, well, to use your stick as a weapon on anyone, but definitely not above the shoulders, right? So hopefully it's a trend that's just a little bit of an anomaly in league history this year, but it's weird to see 3 suspensions like that all within the same season, relatively short time frame.
I think it's a great point, Dan. And, you talk about the suspensions being heavy. For Dragusika, it was a season-ending 48-game ban. Then you get to the McCallum suspension, that's 8 games. And then Kuleman gets 5. So they're actually going down in value, if you will. I think you're onto something with the rather disturbing nature of the trend. Like, why is it that this is the reaction? Emotion or not, heat of the moment or not, we have to be sure that this is not the reaction that we're getting in the league. And I just hope 5 and 8 games are severe enough, because we talked about this the other week. Even the ugly swing by Dragusika, I don't think Vlasic missed a game, did he? If he did, he only missed 1. And I'm not saying that makes it any less severe, the action by Dragusika, but I don't know. He gets 48 games. Look, John Banks continued to play. I forget who Kuleman got. John Banks is who McCallum
Owen
got.
Protz.
Thank you. You said Protz. Yeah. So, but I don't know. I think we have to be careful about suspending based on the outcome of the play versus suspending based on the action. And this, I'm with you. It's a little bit disturbing. Guys, don't use your sticks like that. Okay. Can we just do that? Use them to score some goals. Everybody likes goals. Goals are sexy. Score goals.
Yeah, I exactly the point I was trying to make with all this, what you just said, is that we tend to suspend the outcome, the player's seriously hurt or not, but I think what they really need to do is get rid of the instinct, right? The instinct should never be there. And, we could probably do a whole podcast on, why is this instinct creeping back in? Is it the 3 fight limit? They can't do anything. They can't really get their vengeance in other ways. They're worried about I don't know. I'm sort of spitballing aloud here, but it's a puzzling recent trend. That instinct is there, because most hockey players know that that's just a no-no. You don't do that two-hander, and if you can't control yourself and you're going to do it, it's going to be to the legs, right? It's not going to be up top. So hopefully this is the end of the trend and the suspensions do the trick. But if not, if we see another, the league might have to ramp it up a little.
We always wrap up our weekly OHL podcast with our prospect of the week. This is the NHL draft eligible player that has caught the most of our attention. I always give Dan honors. I wonder how close we are to the same guy this week, though. But go ahead, Dansky. Start us off. Your prospect of the week is...
I'll try not to step on your toes, Mike. I want to honor a guy who, played 36 games and put up 1 goal and then said, you know what? 3 games this week, I'm going to score 4 in those 3 games. And that was Erie forward Caden Edwards. They move out Dylan, and he's the lone remaining Edwards in Erie, and he says, you know what, I'm going to have to replace some of this production. So I always love seeing a kid, go 36 games with sitting on 1 goal and then get 4 in 3 games. Just unlocked something, starting to feel it. So Caden Edwards is my prospect of the week.
Nice job, Dan. I should have now, I'm going to just do this live and see how quickly I can do it, because when you said 36 games and 1 goal, I know it wasn't that, but I also know that this guy was doing one thing with one team, and since being traded to another, his his production has taken off remarkably. So I'm just going to get the numbers that he had with Sarnia: 34 games and 6 goals. Now, in 19 games with the London Knights, he's got 13 goals. This is all alluding to my prospect of the week being Ryan Brown. So not 1 goal in 36, but only 6 goals in 34, and then greener pastures, if you'll forgive another pun. But here's the thing about Ryan Brown. I will say, just be so good that they have to notice you, right? And since the trade to London, he's got a 12-game point streak with 23 points on 11 goals and 12 assists. And here's why I say be so good, so that they have to notice you, because when the NHL's midseason rankings came out, the Central Scouting Rankings, Ryan Brown's name was not found among the 80 OHLers that the NHL ranked in that midseason ranking. So I think Ryan Brown may be turning a head or two as we get into the latter stages of this season, but he is my prospect of the week.
Say what you want about the London Knights, but they have a way of identifying talent in players, right? And there's a kid that Sarnia had spent a relatively high pick on, and just had been treading a bit of water, but he's unlocked it now. And last game I saw him, he really looked good, full value for the points as well.
All right, I will be back home next week where I belong, and we'll have that big game we already alluded to between Windsor and Kitchener to talk about, and of course, lots more, because the closer the playoffs get, the bigger the games get, and Dan and I are here to watch all of it with you and then talk about it every week on this podcast. Remember, you can find Dan at his name on X, at Dan Mahar. I am at Farwell_OHL. We love the emails. Keep them coming. OHLpodcast@Rogers.com. And please subscribe, like, leave a comment, a review, whatever it is. Tell a friend. And we're here every Tuesday with another episode of the OHL Podcast.